Is everything we know about emotional regulation wrong? Stick around and find out. Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with expert Trish Caldwell. Welcome to Mind Amendment, the podcast that dares to challenge the ways that we think about mental health, physical health, addiction, and healing. So, most people have been told just to think differently when triggered. Why is that information ineffective and potentially harmful?
Because it's the wrong part of the brain. So as I had mentioned before, right, so the brain has a couple of different states. That limbic state is the much more emotional, reactive, impulsive part of our brain. When that part is incredibly triggered, what it does to the cortex is it knocks it offline, right? So that's a survival skill for us to be able to have. The more distressed we are, the more triggered we are, the less we end up using our cortex. Simple ways that we know that is that when you are in an argument with somebody, if you're driving again and you are in a lot of traffic or you have somebody cut you off, you don't think quite as rationally, right? You become much more reactive, and it's literally where you've said things that you're like, I don't even know why I said that. Like, that's crazy of me to have said that. So when we're thinking about doing cortex level work, which is all cognitive, like think through your consequences, do those, think through the choices. If somebody is really triggered, they can't activate that part of the brain. So the way that I talk about it when I talk to our teams is it's like asking somebody to access Wi-Fi with a flip phone, right? The more triggered you are, you can't access Wi-Fi on a flip phone.
Right.
So you can keep asking somebody to do it, but you're likely going to either make them really angry and they act out, or they're going to, internalize it and feel more depressed thinking there's something wrong with them. So that's why it doesn't work. Now, there's been research to say when emotion regulation is coupled with cognitive behavioral therapy, it's more effective because you want the person. So when somebody's really triggered, we're also our emotions, that whole idea of like your emotions, your feelings are facts, right? Mm-hmm. Your feelings aren't facts, right? That your feelings can be liars, right? Mm-hmm. Like they can tell you stories that are just not true based on a bad day. And so if you can regulate yourself, so when you experience it, if you can regulate yourself first, calm that down, then you're able to get into your cortex more. And then you're like, oh, that person was probably not trying to hurt my feelings. That person was probably not trying to do that. And it changes the way that you respond. Does that make sense?
Yes. So how would you say that, how did we get to a place where we got emotional regulation so wrong? What's the missing piece?
I don't think we paid attention to it. I really don't think that there was as much attention paid to the dysregulation of the human because we kept trying to get them to access the Wi-Fi. So we were continually trying to meet a human and saying, if you just wanted the recovery more, you would be able to get it. If you were really motivated, you'd be able to find it. If you really cared about your family, you would have recovery. And those are all cortex level things where most individuals say, I agree. Mm-hmm. So what you heard most people saying is, I don't know why I did that. I don't know. I know I shouldn't have done that. I don't know why. I'm sorry. And so that was an indication that they do know what they need to do. Most people, when you ask them about any level of recovery, they know what they need to do. They don't need me to tell them what to do. What they need help with is to get regulated first. That's what they're not paying attention to. So you can't do that cortex level response if you're highly triggered. If you're in your body much more than your cortex, then you lash out, then you act impulsively, then you're much more reactive. So regulating that first gives you the option of choice.
So what is the right way to regulate emotions? What's that key we've been missing?
Teaching. I mean, it's almost, I don't want to mean to sound like flippant, but like most people don't know how to regulate. And so when somebody's like, well, how do you know if they can't regulate? I'm like, do they lose their temper all the time? Are they reactive? Are they using something as a solution to when they're really distressed? Is it alcohol? Is it substances? Is it self-harm? Is it isolation? So for me as a practitioner, I always look to make sure that somebody can regulate without me prompting them. So when you get really distressed, when you start to feel really depressed or isolative, when you're having strong urges, can you regulate without me prompting you regulating? That's the sign of somebody being able to navigate more and go a little bit further in their own stories or traumas, or right, because they can do it on their own.
And you've developed part of the dynamic curriculum that you developed that is simple enough for me to remember in a time where I have the insight to realize that I'm dysregulated is a simple three-step word process. Tell me a little bit more about that and how it works.
Yeah. So the curriculum for us at Promises is recognize, regulate, and respond. It is as simple for our patients as it is for our site, right? So I want our teams to know this is really what we're focused in and on here, right? These are individuals in the earliest phases of their recovery, and all we need to do is help them to recognize when they're triggered. For so many people, they wait till they're in the crisis, and then they attempt to use a skill like breathing, which is ridiculous, right? Like, so if I'm about Wait, hold on. You just pissed off a whole group of people. Yeah, I mean, I love good breathing. I love good breathing, but if you're about to use heroin, are you going to breathe out that urge? You're going to take a good old-fashioned breath and be like, I don't need to use anymore? So I worked with like young adults that had physical altercations. And so they're all walking around with like these tools being like, I'm going to breathe. I'm going to doodle. I'm going to like journal. And I'm like, you're about to get into a fist fight? You're going to journal that out? No. So you're like, so it's a great tool. So for anybody that loves themselves some good breaths, I'm saying people should be doing it much more mindfully all the time.
Yes.
That is not a coping skill to keep you from engaging and supporting your recovery long term. You can't breathe out an urge to get into a fight, and you can't breathe out an urge to use a substance, right?
You're talking about skills that are very useful in times where you're more regulated.
Yeah. Yeah, if I'm a little annoyed, I'll breathe.
They're maintenance skills.
Yeah.
So, okay, I because I know, so this is for the purpose of kind of opening the box here. When we talk about recognize, can you tell for our audience what you mean by that? Like how can someone recognize, right? Like, because
signs.
Yeah, like we don't want to get to that state that you're talking about where you're all of a sudden highly dysregulated and about to do the thing that they don't want to do. We don't want them to do.
Yeah.
We want them to recognize first.
Yeah.
What does that entail?
So our body, the beauty of our bodies is it tells us all kinds of signs. We have all kinds of warning signs that we oftentimes don't pay attention to. So it could be that you get a headache. It can be the tension in your neck. It can be that your stomach starts to, feel tight, or you start to feel nauseous. It can be the shaking of your leg. It can be where you start feeling the stress in your body. It can be so I would always tell somebody when they were like, I'm never going to do this. I'm like, this is hopeless for me, right? I'm always the one that gets things wrong. And I'm like, so you're already triggered. And they were like, I don't feel triggered. I'm like, when you're mean to you, you're already out of your cortex. Because I met you when you were saying, I believe in myself. I met you when you said, I really want recovery this time. This time I mean it, right? That's who you are. Your cortex is who you are. Your limbic system is who you become when you're triggered. But there's all these small warning signs that you have to recognize in order to say, like, if you notice that you're starting to feel anxious, that's the moment to take a breath. People are waiting for like something terrible that they're like, well, I know I have to regulate then. And you're like, it could just be the slight, like somebody looked at you wrong. It can be anything.
Why do you think that it is that we bypass the warning signs so easily? In general, we all do it.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that because if you were to take somebody that wasn't from our society and observe one of us individuals in a natural state through the process of being, starting to get triggered, and then in a highly dysregulated state, I truly believe that they would be an average person from this alternate universe would be able to spot and say,
sure,
they need to start. Who's going to help?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Why do you think that we are all not just the people that end up needing alcohol addiction treatment.
Yeah.
We're all in a place where naturally we don't typically have the skill set and the insight to identify when it's time to recognize dysregulation is coming.
Yeah. I mean, I think we focus in on the things that have the biggest consequences to us, right? And just in generalities, right? But there's these things called micro stressors that we don't pay attention to. And so those micro stressors we overlook because we've got 1,000 other things to focus in on. And if I'm just feeling a little bit anxious, like, you're going to be fine, Trish. Like, keep on moving on, right? Because I got work to do and I got to make sure that I got dinner ready and I got to make sure. So you ignore the micro stressors because they're not significant enough to make the change. But the thing that we've stopped paying attention to is that all of those micro stressors eventually turn into that event, right? So when people say, I don't know why I ended up engaging in whatever the behavior was, right? They think it was one event that did it. They think it's like one trigger, one thing that happened, and you're like, it wasn't. It was all of these things that were leading up to it over the course of days, hours, weeks. And so that's the recognize. For our organization, we have everybody trained, right? Not just the therapists, because most of our folks are with other folks for more time, right? And our human reactions. So everybody in our facility is trained in this, because I might notice, like, hey, Patrick, it seems like every day after dinner, you are more stressed. Did you notice that about you? Most of the time when we say that to the patients, they're like, no. So we all have to help each other.
Yeah.
Be like, that seems to be a pain point for you. It's the avoidance of a family phone call. It's the stress of going to bed, right? And having those racing thoughts. It's the anticipation of a discharge. It's all of these things that your body is going to start giving you warning signs. Craving comfort foods, right? On like simple things that you're like, just pay attention, right? And we all need to do that. I need to do that. That's why I was asked, do you want coffee today? And I was like, no, because if I had coffee, I would get more dysregulated, right? Because this is already nervous for me. So it's like those small warning signs that we have to be able to recognize, because it's there that we can make the greatest impact in regulating.
Okay, so let's go to the next step of what the regulation part is. If we can, I mean, obviously we're not going to go through the whole curriculum, but like, what are some examples of what you define a general go-to is for re-regulation in a dysregulated state?
Yeah.
Or a pre-dysregulated state?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to matter to the level of dysregulation, right? And so that's a lot of the focus of our curriculum, is making sure that so our patients have tools, right? So I like to say, you have a bunch of hammers, right? When you're saying, like, my skill, like my coping skill is breathing, doodling, journaling, right? All of these things. It's that they're walking around with a bunch of hammers trying to build a house of recovery. That you're like, those are the same. So whether you want to doodle, journal, or breathe, that's a regulation skill. That's like, I'm distressed a little bit, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed, and so I can engage in this, right? I'm not too overwhelmed. And then there's these tools that you're like, you need these to like not make things worse for you. That's when you're really triggered, when you're about to get into a fight, if you're about to use, right? And so those are much more physiological. So like holding an ice cube, doing sit squats, right? So like
oh, I've never heard that one.
Is that what it's called? Like, so you can do the squats, but where
stand against a wall,
yes.
in the, like, where your legs are at is it 90 degree?
Yes, 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So that is like physiologically, if you've ever done it, the only thing your brain is going to start paying attention to is that your thighs are burning.
Right.
Right. So then it pops you right out of that thought for a second, and it just gives you a chance to respond differently. And they need to be ones that you can do in a crisis anywhere. So a lot of people are like, I go to the gym. And I'm like, again, I love that for you, right? I love that you're going to the gym, but you can't go to the gym when you're at work.
Right.
Right? You can't go to the gym if you're at the airport.
Yeah.
But could you do those planks on the wall?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right? So you need things that are quick. So it's making sure that everybody has the right tools and a variety of tools so that they stop walking around with the same 5 hammers, just called something different.
I want to give a couple more just insights to our audience because I love some good takeaways. Are there any more that come to mind for you right now as far as the like when you're in it, besides the holding ice cube and the wall sits that are really effective?
So if you're really, really triggered, those are your better ones, right? So the holding the ice cube, putting cold water on your face. It's like all these things that we've always said, like people like tell you like, go splash your face with cold water. And you're like, okay, but you didn't know why. It's because it literally slows down your nervous system.
So let's say that I'm in a situation where we're like, okay, I'm high functioning. I'm in a boardroom and I'm either in the middle of a meeting or about to start a meeting and someone has done something that is extremely triggering to me. Is there anything I can do in that moment, or do I need to get up and excuse myself to go to the restroom or a place where I'm not going to be seen and I can practice one of these principles?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's where the recognize comes into play. Because if you can recognize, do you think that you're going to take that next step and you're going to do something that you'll later regret? If you are, then I would say your best solution is to excuse yourself, right? And go do a skill so that you can calm yourself enough so that you can go back. If you think that I'm pretty upset about this, but I'm going to just take a minute and I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to quietly kind of pace my breathing, which is different than just like a regular breath, then do that, right? But that's where you have to start recognizing what your warning signs are. Our bodies tell us, right? So I worked with a young man that he started noticing that his fists would clench, right? That was where he was noticing, like that's where he could make a change before a fist fight, right? Like, so again, obviously I worked with young men that had aggressive behaviors, but it works for all of them. So yeah, if you're in a boardroom, you have to start recognizing, do you feel like you have the ability to use those skills? And that's part of the curriculum too, is that we want our patients practicing it with us. So much of treatment was like talking about things and then saying they'll practice it when they left treatment. But that's like the hardest time to practice something, right? That transition is one of the most difficult transitions for our patients. Highest rates of overdoses, highest rates of suicidality, right? Like that transition is pretty important. So if you practice it while with us, you build the competence.
Yeah.
And then the confidence, right? That you would know, if I'm in that boardroom, I know I got to go.
Okay.
Because I'm going to say something that's going to cost me my job, right? Versus like, no, I think I got this one. I'm just going to do some paced breathing and I'm going to distract myself in the moment.
Well, and I love how you said that because it's really weighing out the outcomes. You know, you may feel like, I don't want to get up out of the boardroom because what will everybody say, yada, yada, yada. But if you're able to roll the tape through, it's, okay, I'm at a fork in the road.
Yep.
I could potentially we could go way off track and talk about like a job loss at this point.
Correct.
Or I could just run the risk of somebody being a little perturbed that I interrupted the boardroom to exit for a few minutes and get to a better place. Before we move on to respond, I just wanted to ask you, do you have any tips for somebody who's not at that place where they're going to end up at treatment with us necessarily, but they're like, well, how do I get to a place of understanding? Like, I don't know that I can't really get to that place of understanding what my recognize, like, Is there a good way that somebody can incorporate something that shows them what they're doing? You know, we're just so far off from that ability to have the insight and actually recognize.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things that I would say just off the bat, right? If you're like, hey, I'm not in therapy, I'm not doing any of these things, I think the two things would be like, just slow down for a second and pay attention. Just pay attention to your body because it's going to tell you, right? In a very ridiculous example, so when my body is stressed, so I'm a vegetarian, right? I eat relatively healthy. And when I was at work previously, I started craving McDonald's French fries. It's a crazy, absurd thing for me to be craving. And so like 3 days in a row, I was like, who wants McDonald's French fries? And it was a coworker that was like, you all right? And I'm like, yeah, why? And they were like, I've known you for 5 years and I've never known you to go get McDonald's French fries. That's a recognize, right? So pay attention to yourself, pay attention to your body, and then ask the people around you that care about you. hey, if you see me acting different, can you just give me a heads up? That coworker literally, and I'm like a DBT trained therapist, right? Like I'm a therapist in the field. And it was a coworker that was like, are you sure you're all right? Because you don't normally want that. But that was my body craving that salt.
Yep.
Right? That's what comfort food is, right? It releases a tremendous amount of like wonderful dopamine, right? All of these things that if I'm feeling stress and some of those neurotransmitters are depleted, that comfort food spikes it for you. Mm-hmm. So my brain was telling me, get yourself together, right? You're feeling really overwhelmed. And I was finding a solution. The French fries work temporarily, right? Mm-hmm. It's just the long-term effects that I wouldn't want.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say. Start with yourself. Slow it down and pay attention to the subtle, and ask the people around you that love you.
Perfect. What is the respond?
The respond is just choice, right? So if you're able to recognize when you're triggered and you can regulate, it gives you the choice to respond. So sometimes you might choose, I'm going to do this thing because I want to, but if you do it with intentionality, you don't live with regret. So the regulation first, because too often we get dysregulated and we react in it. If you can recognize, hey, I am actually dysregulated. I might want McDonald's French fries, right? That might be my choice. So if I'm regulated, I'm like, nah, I think I'm just going to have it. That's my choice to respond. I don't regret that. But when I act in the dysregulation, that's where we oftentimes live in the regret of like, I wish I didn't do that. That's where we come back to say, I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. So the intentionality, the choice to respond is just that. So when we talk about it, I'm like, I just need you to recognize when you are getting triggered. I need you to regulate it so that you have the choice to respond. It's that simple.
It is simple, and it's exciting. I love talking about this period, but especially with you, Trish. And I'm so glad that our audience gets to join in on these conversations with us together. So this episode, this part of our conversation has been absolutely wonderful, and I'm so excited for it to continue. And I'm just going to pose the question for our audience now that we know how to regulate. What do we do with that regulation? Stick with us, and we're going to talk more about that on part 3 of my conversation with Trish Caldwell. Thanks for tuning in, and I will close out by asking you, this is your moment, this is your mind. What are you going to do with it?